So without further ado, my name's Gavin Keane, Managing Director of Cloud Made Simple. We've been around now 18 years, so we've been in the game quite a long time. And every day my team and I ask, how can we keep helping our clients? Our top three priorities are customer service, IT management, data and network security. But it's important also to educate and demonstrate the tools that we use to help your businesses. And it's also really important that you understand what we do in the background. And we certainly can't force you to take the services we're going to mention today, but I think it's really important to understand the security risks and also the things you can put in place to stop those things hurting your business. So we've invited two fantastic speakers today. One is Jay from Datto, and he's going to be talking about K365, which part of that is the remote management and monitoring, and we've also got Mark on the line as well, and he's going to talk about the Microsoft Business Premium licenses, which are the real gold standard in Microsoft licenses for small to medium business. So we're going to do a deep dive into those to actually what it is about those products that actually protects your business. So it's a fascinating look behind the scenes, under the hood, and so really looking forward to kicking off tonight to hear from Jay and Mark, and I hope you enjoy it. And again, if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. So without further ado, Jay, would you like to take over the screen and tell us a bit about Datto and K365?
Absolutely. Thank you, Gavin. Good to be back on. And morning, Mark. I guess for the first part of today's session, guys, I want to take you guys through a bit of a journey on what Kaseya 365 is and sort of what value will pertain to your business, right? And before we jump into Kaseya and who we are and what we do and how our tools could potentially be of benefit, I'll go through a very small, call it a journey, maybe an educational piece on why we're here today and sort of why we're building these tools that essentially prevent the bad actors from the outside trying to get to the inside. And then I've seen some of the cool stats that Mark's also got in his presentation. He'll put some of that, the verbal that I'm putting down into fact, and show you some of the numbers and trends that are occurring within our industry and why these bad actors are trying to get in. So again, as Kevin mentioned, if there's any questions, there is a QA. We'll do our best to obviously answer them, and if we can't, we'll get you the answers shortly after the webinar. But I'll set my timer here for 20 minutes, and if we run a little over, I'm sure Gavin won't get too cross. But as I did the other day, I just want to firstly apologise to the entire crowd on this call that I don't have my camera on. The long story short around that is when I started with Kaseya around 10 odd years ago, I went to JB Hi-Fi and I got a brand spanking new webcam, and it was the most expensive one on the shelf, and it's had a good run, but it died on me last Thursday or Friday or Tuesday, I can't remember, and I think 1 human years must be 20 camera years. I don't know, must be an old one, so it's decided to die on me. So I do look like the thumbnail in my Teams, so I apologize again for not having my camera on to the audience. But essentially, my name is Jay Sickley. I manage the pre-sales solutions engineering team for Australia Pacific for a company called Kaseya. Now, you guys may not have heard about Kaseya. We haven't typically been a household name or a household brand like potentially Samsung or Miele or Dyson or Toyota or something like that. We are typically what you would say behind the scenes, right? So Kaseya essentially is a very large software vendor, and they either build tools internally that would provide some kind of benefit or value to managed service providers like CMS and Gavin's team, or we may potentially sell direct to end businesses in some parts of the world, right? But in APAC specifically, we would sell our solutions and tie them around or productize them around some value through potentially like a CMS, right? So that's who Kaseya is. Think of us as just a very big software vendor who develops or requires security-based solutions, backup solutions, and tools that would help tech guys do their job in a more efficient and more secure manner. So I manage the pre-sales SE team for this part of the world. Now, before I jump into, I guess, a bit more around the product and what value that's going to bring to you guys, and if it piques your interest, what I do want to do is go through a bit of an educational piece, right? And I
Do
hope
you want
those
to?
slides are.
I think you need to put your slides on the screen.
There we go. Good, good. Good thing I was sitting here the entire time. I actually hadn't gone through anything. Well, I did have this one up. Where are we? We'll go back. This was my landing page, so you didn't miss much, guys. But moving on with the presentation, I want to go through a bit of a journey and maybe provide some educational or thought, I guess, some thought pieces around these concepts in terms of losing data, right? It's a lot easier than what you guys might actually think. And me being within the data security, data backup, and my sort of experiences come from data backup for the last 13, 14 years. With my tenure in these organizations, I've seen that the trend of losing data is actually a lot easier than what people think, right? And there's common scenarios out there in terms of human error and mistakes. I've gone into businesses and they've got servers sitting under the desk, and above the desk is a kettle and a sink, right? And people are filling up glasses of water and drink bottles, and it's a lunchroom, and the server's plugged in with the power cables hanging out the side, and it's exposed to the elements in the environment, right? All it's going to take is for someone to spill a glass of water or a kettle or something like that. System and network configurations or programming errors or application issues, right? These could be bugs within the environment, bugs within updates. It could be the way that something's potentially configured, like a firewall or switch. Something configured within your file server or your cloud server that's causing these issues and these downtimes. Natural disasters. Well, we've clearly seen what's been happening in Queensland for the last couple of weeks with the threat of cyclones and heavy winds and hard rain. I know down here in Melbourne we do get periods where it'll be 35 degrees and sunny, and you go for a walk with the dog, and then by the time you get home it's like 14 and it's bucketing down rain, and you don't predict for this stuff, right? You can't plan for it sometimes. Then you've got things like hardware and software glitches or hardware failures. At the end of the day, a server, a laptop, a desktop, it's a bit of hardware. It's like a vehicle. It's like a car, right? You're going to get a pop tire. You're going to get a flat battery. You're going to throw the dog in the back and they're going to scratch the upholstery, right? You get these problems with hardware, right? At the end of the day, they're consumables. They're made to be replaced. Servers, desktops, laptops, keyboard, mice, monitors, headsets, these things can fail. My headset could have failed and prevented me from jumping on this webinar as an example, right? I would have had to scramble around and try and find my Apple EarPods, for example. Then you've got insider threats and malware and ransomware and viruses, right? And these are the two topics I really want to focus on. And I believe, right, it flows quite nicely into Mark's presentation, because again, Mark from Ingram is going to have a lot of the nice stats around what percentages of people are being hacked and what percentage of businesses are being asked for ransom and so on. So I'll introduce you guys into that concept in terms of insider threats and malware and ransomware. The most common form of breach or attack or downtime for a small business nowadays, sort of sub 20 seats or sub 20 users, we'll call them, we'll generalize small businesses, is going to be insider threats or typically malware and ransomware, right? So these are viruses that get into the system. These are hackers from quote unquote enemy states or enemy countries or enemy parts of the world where they're trying to target small businesses. And typically the consensus is, well, we're not a Mitre 10, we're not a Bunnings, we're not a Toyota, we're not a Westpac, we're not going to get breached. Why on earth would hackers want to come after us and try and plant a bug inside our network? We've only got 6 employees. We turn over a couple of mil as a business. We're just a family accounting business or a farmer's market or something like that. We've got a chain of stores across Australia. Like, why would they want to target us? Truth is, when these attackers are looking at ways to make money, right, and in some parts of the world it's actually legal to be running and operating like this, and you get full funding and support from the government, right? It's quite strange when you think about it. When they target 1,000 small businesses in Australia, all it takes is for potentially 20 or 30 or 50 of them to hit and be thrown with a virus or a malware that says, hey, we've got your data. You need to pay us 1 Bitcoin or half a Bitcoin or whatever it is in dollars, right, to get your data back. And we'll give you the decryption key and you can unlock all your data and we'll give it back to you. But you've got to pay us. And if you don't pay us, well, we're going to expose your data to the internet. And then what that means is, well, all the bad people on the internet are going to get your credentials, and they're going to start accessing your network and hacking your systems, and they're going to turn your business over, right? So what does any concerned business owner do, or a group of shareholders perhaps? They go, oh, we better pay this ransom. What's $50,000 if we keep it quiet and we just pay the hackers and they give us our data back and we just go on our way, right? So if the attackers can get hypothetically $50,000 from 20, 30, 40, 50 businesses at a strike rate of, they do that once every fortnight, it is much more profitable and successful than attacking a Westpac or trying to attack a Westpac or a Mitre 10 or a Melbourne airport, for example, where they're going to ask for $1 million and the chance of actually getting that revenue or money is slim to none, right? So it's a lot more profitable for these attackers to go after small businesses. And typically they'll try and phish via email phishing, or they'll try and plant a bug in the network, or through an open door or an open port, or through a vulnerable server, right? Or I've seen, and this is a true story, many years ago, there was an IT conference event somewhere in the US. I believe it was Dallas, somewhere in the US. And what these hackers had done is they'd flown in from their enemy states and they deployed a team with USB sticks, like hundreds of USB sticks with different labels on them. And they'd gone around into the toilets and into the sort of bathrooms and eating areas and thrown these USB sticks on the floor and with labels like, important data or critical information or payroll or something like that. So what someone's done is they've gone, oh, I've just found a USB that says payroll. I might pick that up. What that person does is they go home or they go back to their office, they plug it into their computer and go, oh, let's see what payroll information is on here or what important data is on this USB. They open it up and it appears to be empty. So they just grab the USB and they throw it in the bin. They think, oh, well, that was a funny joke by someone, right? Little do they know, they've probably just implanted a bug into the network just by sharing USBs around, right? And that bug can then allow these outside attackers to get into the network for a short period of time, enough to lock down your data. Now, why are SMBs so attractive to cyber criminals? Well, I'll summarize this slide before we jump into some of the products. Limited resources, right? An SMB or a small to medium business is probably not going to have the budget to go and employ an expensive internal IT person, right? Some businesses probably can, majority of businesses can't. And that's why majority of businesses will outsource to potentially a CMS, right? Gavin's team and an IT organization. So limited resources in-house to check that the firewalls are up to date and check that the security patches on the server are up to date and so on. There's a lack of awareness of what's happening in the world, right? So if we look at the top right corner, there's cyber awareness. The managing director or the CEO of a turf company or a metal fabrication company or something like that is not going to go to IT conventions because they've got more important things to worry about. They've got to turn the business over. They've got to pay employees. They've got to put bread on the table at the end of the day. They've got to keep the company going. Their concern isn't going to an IT convention somewhere in Sydney and learning about these cyber threats and how they can be protected, right? So there's a lack of awareness there. You have weaker defenses, which in turn allow that valuable data inside your organization to be exposed to the outside world. So weaker defenses, again, sort of is a bit of a combination of limited resources and a lack of awareness. When you've got weaker defenses, it's like, for example, you've got a brand new home, you've got some valuables inside. Let's just put a very small bamboo fence out the front of the driveway, 0.5 meter tall, right? It should prevent all the small dogs from jumping in and should maybe deter some thieves from across the street from wanting to walk over and jump the fence. But anyone who's really determined is going to step over that fence and they're going to try and get into my house to take my valuables, right? So when you've got a weak defense, you're kind of deterring people from an outside or a visual perspective. But if somebody really wants to get in, they will get in, right? And then in turn, what's stolen is it's your valuable data, right? You leave a window open for a long period of time and you're not home. Someone's probably scoped that window out for a couple of days and they think, well, if I could just take that TV, if I could just go in there and rummage through some of the filing cabinets, I might find some hidden gold or some hidden jewelry or something, right? That's what that valuable data is to you. It's your financial information, it's your employee details, it's credit card data you might save from your customers and so on. So how do we protect ourselves, or at least start to think about maybe some kind of compliance, or how do we lift that network boundary, right? If I go back that weaker defenses point on the bottom left corner, how do we lift the defenses much higher? How do we replace that bamboo fence at the front of the gate, maybe like a 1.5 meter or a 2 meter Color bond fence as an example, or how do we put something up big enough to deter 99% of people from trying to even look over our fence, right? It comes down to the concept of protection, right? Putting protection first, or having a mentality of protection first. So here's an example of a framework, a cybersecurity framework called NIST, that you guys could potentially do some light reading on. It's not too detailed stuff. There are versions of it on the internet that sort of keep it in simple terms, we'll say, right? But then there's also things like there's an Australian standard, there's a New Zealand standard. In Australia, for example, we've got the Essential Eights. I'm sure you guys have probably read about it or heard about it. The Essential Eight has different maturity levels, right? So you could be aligned to the Essential Eight maturity level 0, which is it's the basics, but you should be striving, you should be pushing to achieve at least a 2 or a 3 maturity level and beyond, right? They're purely just frameworks to help you guys align to. It's almost like saying, well, if I want my vehicle insured, right, with full comp insurance, well, I've got to have good tires. It's got to be roadworthy. It's got to have no prior damage. It's hypothetically, it doesn't need, it can't have finance on it or whatever it happens to be. So what do? Well, you bring yourself up to a level of compliance for, that insurance company to provide you full comp insurance. They're obviously not going to insure you if the car's beaten up and it's missing a window and it's running on 3 wheels and it's got half a steering wheel. The car needs to be compliant. Same with your business network, right? You need to be able to have application control, application blacklisting, monitoring what websites certain staff might be going to and locking down the ones that aren't business relative, right? Locking down any open doors or ports on your server infrastructure, on your network, making sure your firewall is up to standard, right? And how do we do all of that? I know it seems like a lot of information and it seems a little daunting. Well, that's where hopefully something like Kaseya 365, it's got no relation to Microsoft 365. It's maybe a coincidence, or I'm not sure in terms of why we put the name 365 there, but the concept of Kaseya 365, in essence, is a way for Kaseya to provide, we'll call it a bundle of solutions that allows an IT organization or a Microsoft, a managed security service provider like CMS and Gavin's team to go to market and provide these solutions that essentially give value to your businesses, right? So Kaseya 365 is going to have within it essentially the ability for Gavin and Gavin's team to go in and monitor the network using an RMM solution, right? And I don't know if you guys can see my mouse pointer on the screen, probably not, but we'll work left to right there. So managing all the infrastructure.
Yep.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. I'll do that there. So managing the infrastructure within the organization starts with what we call an RMM solution, a remote monitoring and management solution. That I'll show you some snippets of it too. So don't be too maybe confused here in terms of the imagination. But essentially, an RMM is a web interface that allows an IT professional to see all of your infrastructure, your servers, your desktops, your routers, your switches, your printers, your cloud applications, how they're performing. Are they causing any issues like high disk usage, or are they powered off? Can we connect to them, and so on? And if there is an issue, an RMM solution or a platform is going to create a ticket straight into Gavin's environment and say, hey, there's been a problem with this particular application. It's worth your team looking into. All right, so there's proactive monitoring and proactive alerting inside an RMM solution. Inside the RMM solution, there's going to be abilities to provide antivirus. All right, that second point down there in the middle. Then advanced software management, which is around patching all of your Windows and third-party applications. So just like your iPhone, you would typically update, your versions of Apple iPhone to the latest version, or if you've got an Android or a Samsung, you would always keep your OS up to date. Yeah, I'm sure you would. And just like me, I say, do it later tonight while I'm sleeping, and then when I wake up in the morning, that annoying little number 1 next to my settings icon has disappeared because I've updated to the latest version of iPhone. But are you actually updating all the apps inside your iPhone? Like your banking application, you guys might be into stocks and shares and trading. Are you updating to the latest versions of those individual apps? Well, if you're not, you're potentially leaving yourself vulnerable to those apps having a backdoor, where if you were to go to maybe a website that's been breached and you don't know it's been compromised, those websites could potentially ask to access certain apps on your phone, and you might just be flicking through it and accidentally click on yes without actually reading the contents of that message. You might allow people to access apps within your phone or have access to data in your phone through that vulnerable app. So making sure your apps are up to date. Antivirus, I mentioned this one before. everyone on this call should know what an antivirus is. It's just basically a bit of software you would deploy to your machine that keeps all the bad stuff away. The viruses, the pop-ups, the malware. Hopefully it will do some kind of phishing and email-based scanning as well. You then have ransomware detection, the one right in the middle there. And this is basically a patent to us in terms of within our technology anyway, where that ransomware detection module is going to scan a user's device, their desktop, their laptop, and it's going to look for signs of ransomware. All right, so these are executables, or these are programs or apps that run behind the scenes and you don't know about them, and they run quietly, and they go through and they encrypt all of your data. This is typically what the hackers will use in terms of ransomware, to actually encrypt your data and lock you down and then ask for money. So we will detect ransomware as it's executing and locking down your data. Okay. You can think of ransomware detection as maybe like a facial recognition on the camera system. Like I've got a security system here at home. If someone enters my driveway, like when my parents drop in for a coffee, it says a person has entered your driveway or a person has walked up to your front porch. That's what ransomware detection is doing. It's looking for that actor to be like, oh, someone's in your boundary. They're doing something they shouldn't be doing. Then you have an EDR, an endpoint detection and response, built into that RMM. So an EDR is looking at your machine, your computer, your PC, and saying, well, hang on, this user, we'll say Jennifer, and I don't know if there's any Jennifers on the call. I don't see a Jennifer on the call. And if anyone knows Jennifer, nothing personal against Jennifer, it's just a name that I use as an example. Jennifer shouldn't be going on these specific parts of the operating system. Jennifer typically doesn't go into the registry and the settings of the computer and try and run some of these scripts that are unverified. So why is this machine doing things that are abnormal and out of its usual behavior? That's what an EDR system is going to do. Right? Endpoint detection and response, that we can go as far as extended detection and response, where it's looking at the behavior of that computer, not the user, right? Then you have the managed detection and response portion. So this is what we call a SOC, a security operations center, right? So there's think of them as big security operations centers. So think of them as big, we'll call them, what's the word I'm looking for here? I guess we could say there's a bunch of engineers and security specialists within departments within our organization in Kaseya, some based out of Bangalore, majority based out of the US, and I believe in Ireland and in the UK, so 3 or 4 different parts of the world, where our security specialists are looking at all of these solutions for Gavin and Gavin's team, and making sure that they identify any threats or abnormal behavior, whether it's 2 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and they can proactively act and isolate computers and isolate machines and kill connections to computers and lock people out of their systems if they feel that there is something funky happening here that shouldn't be happening, right? So you've got your managed detection and response layer at the bottom, and that's optional if you guys wanted to bolt that on as part of your Kaseya 365 bundle with Gavin, right? And then last but not least, you have endpoint backup. So if all else fails, hey, we can always recover from a very solid backup, right? And in terms of that endpoint backup, that's basically just going to protect the workstation or the system or the PC in the office that the managing director or the CEO or the CFO of your organization might be using. Why? Because as much as we can educate people and tell people not to store things on their desktop and in their downloads and in their documents and in their pictures, look, it's human nature. I do it too, and I work for a security company. I keep things on my desktop. I keep things in downloads and pictures and whatnot. Luckily, my PC's backed up, right? And that's what you want. If you know that people are keeping data off the server and off the cloud, which they shouldn't be, and they're keeping it on their local systems, and you think we've told them enough, well, let's back their system up. We can throw an endpoint backup agent onto the top of that, and it will back up that entire system. So when we round everything down to basically what that product, I guess you could say, is called, it's called Kaseya 365. There is a Pro and there is an Express version. Basically, the Pro is everything that we saw on this slide. So it's going to give you an antivirus. It's going to give you the overarching monitoring in our RMM. It's going to give you Windows and third-party application patching. It's going to give you everything, even that SOC solution down the bottom where our engineers are monitoring your environments and proactively saying, oh, Gavin, we've identified a fault or an issue on this workstation. We've isolated it. Here's the ticket. And then if you just wanted to, I guess, cut down and maybe just go to the entry level, we've also got the Express version as well. It just simply has everything without that managed SOC. So our team isn't looking at the alerts proactively 2 a.m. or 2 p.m. We can exclude that SOC out. But again, these are things you can talk about with Gavin in terms of how it works, priced, and how it's positioned. So just wanted to wrap up here. I'm sort of coming up to the 25-minute marker on my timer here. We'll go through a few examples of what these solutions actually look like. I'll put some screenshots in, and this will be a bit more interactive for you guys to sort of see what the products actually look like, and then I will hand it back to Mark and Gavin. So when we talk about Kaseya 365, well, it all starts with an RMM solution. Again, RMM stands for Remote Monitoring and Management. Right. Typically, what we would do here is we would ask the MSP, so in this case CMS, to pick an RMM solution within our stack, and Gavin's chosen Data RMM in this case, right? So what that looks like from a management portal is this is what that interface looks like. So when Gavin goes to his RMM page and he logs in securely, he can see this as one example. So here you've got a bunch of dashboards about, let's say, customer A or customer B or business A and business B. How is their EDR tracking? Is it deployed to all of their machines? How is the antivirus sitting within their organization? Are they backing up their endpoints like the C-level execs and MD's laptop? Right? How is the software compliance going? What are some of the alerts that we're looking at across that environment? What are some of the coinciding ticket numbers that we've raised a ticket for? Right? And then we can break down inside the RMM things like different customer sites. We could go into some automation and potentially install some applications if that's what was asked of us, and so on. So this is what the I guess the start of our RMM platform looks like when you log in. Then we sort of break it down a bit further, right? If we're looking at all the devices inside, hypothetically, Jennifer's network, and Jennifer works for a mum and dad accountancy firm. Yeah, they've got 5-6 employees. They're a good sized business based out of Melbourne, Victoria. This is all the infrastructure inside their organization. So in a single pane of glass, Gavin's team can see things like the patching status for Windows for those devices. Are they fully patched? What is the software status? It's fully compliant, right? Do we have an EDR deployed? Yes, it's active. Do we have an antivirus deployed? Yes, it's Datto AV, right? Or hypothetically, it might be you guys might be more familiar with something like Malwarebytes or Bitdefender, or, you see the little icon appear in the bottom corner of your screens. What is the AV status? Is it running and up to date, right? Is there a reboot required? Is ransomware detection enabled? Is the device currently online? So these are all checks and balances that are done proactively without having to lift a single finger, that helps you guys align to something like the Essential 8, right? Not to say this is exactly the Essential 8, but it's parts of it that would help you guys build up that maturity level. Right? So yes, we've got an AV, we've got EDR deployed, we're fully patched. Our firewalls and our routers and our modems are of the latest versions. They're, within 1 or 2 years old. They're under warranty. All looks good, right? And then all of that is complemented with a complete security stack. So we sort of went through these in a couple of slides prior. I'm not going to repeat it again, but you've got your EDR, your antivirus, your ransomware detection, your Windows and application patching, and then as well as your Rocket Cyber, the SOC, that managed security, the managed security center that I was talking about. Again, that's the optional part in the licensing. And then when we break it down via an endpoint security policy in my RMM solution, I can deploy all of those applications, right? So going back to here, I can deploy all of these in a single click and make sure that every single device inside your organization is fully compliant. So every device gets this policy. There's no sort of if, maybe, or they might get it. It's every device will and must get this policy that has the AV and the EDR and the patching and all of that deployed. And then lastly, when we bring it all together, this is what our SOC system looks like, right? That managed security center that I was talking about, where we've got different security engineers in different parts of the world. They're looking at a portal like this. And what it does is not only looks at all of your systems and servers and desktops, but you guys are using Microsoft, email, OneDrive, SharePoint, calendars. This system will even go as far as not just your on-premise infrastructure, but also external applications too. And it will say, well, hang on, Jennifer typically logs into her email from Melbourne, Victoria, Why is there a unsuccessful login attempt, 200 times from potentially somewhere in Southeast Asia or Northern Europe or from New Zealand or maybe from Perth for all we know, right? If that's what the alert is showing us. This looks a bit suspicious. Let's lock Jennifer's account just temporarily or do a force a password reset, but then also go in and maybe isolate Jennifer's computer if Jennifer's computer is checking in from a different part of the world. Maybe it was stolen, who knows, right? That's what this security operations center is then able to do. It's able to provide that proactive monitoring. And then just before I hand it back to Mark and Gavin, the last slide here is basically if all else fails, we've got a very solid backup solution. So these are examples of, let's say, a customer, the ABC accounting that we were referring to before, Jennifer's accountancy firm. We've got some laptops or some desktop devices in here, got some backup statuses that are running in live. We can see the protected size of that system, the last backup, the last cloud replication to our Sydney-based data center. So everything is secure, everything's backed up, and if we have to recover, bang, we can actually pull up a backup and pull data down. And with that, I will hand it back to Gavin and Mark. Thank you for your time, guys. And again, I apologize for not having my camera on. I do feel a bit rude, but yeah, thank you again for your time.
No problems. Thanks again, Jay. Magnificent. It's very, very thorough, and I think everyone's got a great understanding of what Kaseya does. And as I said, we use this for all our managed service customers, and just that's that magnificent tool and keeps our customers safe. So thanks again.
Pleasure.
I'll take control now, and beauty, and I'll just click a few buttons and Bob's your uncle. And without further ado, I am going to pass this on now to Mark. And Mark is from Ingram, and Mark is the man when it comes to Microsoft and Ingram. So he is an absolute specialist in the security of Microsoft, and he's going to take you through the business premium license today, which I'm repeating myself, but it is the absolute gold standard for small to medium businesses within the Microsoft stack. So without further ado, Mark, it's all yours.
Awesome. Can you hear me okay, Gav?
Good as gold.
Good as gold. Great. Better than something I dealt with yesterday afternoon. Look, thank you very, very much for inviting myself, and obviously Jay feels the same way about presenting in front of your customers, and especially about some of the technology that we're quite passionate about. As you would have probably seen what Jay's presentation is there. Now, as Gav mentioned, I work for Ingram Micro, purely and solely in the Microsoft Modelworks Security and Copilot feature set, and I've been working across the Microsoft stack for the last 22 or so years now. So it's exciting to see the evolution of it, and it's exciting to see whether we're reaching a pinnacle of, especially around the cybersecurity for the SMB market, and what the available options are for customers these days to ensure that you're mitigating all sorts of risk when it comes to ensuring that your environment is as tight as possible when it comes down to protecting yourselves from a lot of the bad actors out there. Now, as Jay mentioned earlier, there are so many facts and statistics out there. There's a lot of acronyms that float around as well. Locally down here in Australia, we've got governing bodies such as the Australian Signals Directorate, the ASD. We've got subcategories of that called the ACSC as well. So this Australian Cybersecurity Centre, and they provide a lot of advice to the SMB market around things like specific frameworks and cybersecurity frameworks to protect yourself. And Jay, I mentioned earlier a few of them, like NIST is a global one, but down here in Australia we have something called the Essential 8. A lot of which you can tick off with using features such as M365 Business Premium and your Kaseya 365 as well. So everything that CloudMate Super can talk to you about. Now, a lot of facts, so many statistics, especially since COVID really changed the way we work as well. And you can see up on your screen there, there's 4 facts that I wanted to make sure that you're aware of that we're seeing at the moment in the last year or so. And one big thing is that Jay mentioned earlier is that the SMB market believes, look, we're pretty small down here in Australia or down in Victoria as well, and the cyber criminals won't really worry about us too much, but cybercrime is a lot different than what it used to be. Instead of going for the big enterprise grade customers that they know they can get the most return on if they do hack their environment, that it's more of a volume based business. And we're also seeing new terms such as cybercrime as a service as well, and that's got various other names as well. But effectively, that is, there are bad actors globally that, as a service, they will hunt down and target small businesses because it is now a volume-based business. SMBs, I think on average, the statistics saying they spend roughly about $500 on their cybersecurity these days, as opposed to these larger enterprise customers that spend millions on enterprise. So which one do you think they would probably try and target first to get the biggest return? Now, 1 in 3 state that they've had a cybersecurity breach in the last year, and I dare say that's probably even less these days, even more, I should probably say. Now, I won't go in more on stats. Jay's mentioned some, I've mentioned some as well, but probably one thing just to leave you from this before we start talking about the Microsoft 365 Business Premium is that it is, you have the ability to ensure that you mitigate as much risk to your business that you work within, that you've owned, with the tools that you've got in front of you right now, and they are at a simple call to say, Cloud Made Simple, to ensure that you are mitigating as much of that risk as possible. So that's where I just want to leave with that. So let's talk about the Microsoft 365 Business Premium. Now, as everyone's probably aware on the call, there in the Microsoft Business Stack, there are 3 popular bundle SKUs: your Business Basic, your Business Standard, and your Business Premium, which I'm going to talk about today. Your Business Basic and Business Standard, they're effectively the same, where you've got your online services such as your emails are up in the cloud, your files are up in SharePoint, you've got OneDrive, and you obviously can use Teams as well. Now, Business Premium, where it differs from the previous 2 in a major way, is that it now brings that enterprise grade security into the SMB market. And Gav mentioned it's a hero SKU. I can tell you now that in the last 3 years, Business Premium is by far and away the most popular Microsoft SKU for the SMB market. Now, why? Because it does offer an extremely large amount of value for the price that you're paying and what you get. The Microsoft Security business, I believe, siloed now has roughly about 15,000 security engineers under the security umbrella, working day in, day out on these particular products, as well as looking at thwarting any issues as well from a cybersecurity standpoint. So you are backed by a very, 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 very large team globally as well. Now, we're going to talk about a few things: Intune, Purview, Entra, and Defender, and a little bit on, but less on what they call the Azure Virtual Desktop. With Business Premium, we talk about the security side of it, but there's also a massive, massive uptake in the cloud environment. So think about your Windows, your local Windows machine, but sitting up in the cloud, where you can access it from anywhere, from any device as well. So that's something you also have the capability with Business Premium. So let's talk a little bit more about some of these other technical features. But before I jump into that, there's also this little slide to give you a very overall value discussion as to what Business Premium does. It's the comprehensive cost effectiveness and the enterprise grade security, like I mentioned as well. So a couple of things in here that I mentioned in the previous slide. You also get all of your M365 apps, Outlook, Word, Excel, Teams, etc. The licensing complexity is all bundled into the one license, so you need to worry about which license you need to get. It's already all bundled into Business Premium, which adds to the cost effectiveness. Instead of buying these individual licenses like a Defender Pro 365 and a few others, it's already in one SKU at much less of a cost as well. Now, I mentioned enterprise grade security. Now, it is a comprehensive security that is multi-layered. So you'll see things with Business Premium where Kaseya 365 also has added in as well. One thing with cybersecurity is the multi-layered approach has also always been the ideal approach, where if it gets through gate A, you won't be able to get through gate B and vice versa. So you'll see a bit of that as I roll through as well. Now, Business Premium, there are 5 5 distinct pillars that it works within. Identity access controls via what they call Microsoft Entra ID P1. Now that is effectively your user account. That is you, your user and your identity. And all the features that come under that, whether it be multi-factor authentication, single sign-on, we'll talk a little bit about conditional access. Intune talks more about what they refer to, another acronym, another 2 acronyms, MDM and MAM, so Microsoft Device Manager and Microsoft Application Manager. Now, or mobile device manager and application manager. So what it does is instead it will be able to control everything that happens within your device, whether it be enrolled specifically for your organization or if it's a BYO device as well. Now, Defender for Business, thinking about threat vulnerability management, another acronym I'll talk about real quickly. Defender for 365, that is that you get your spam filtering automatically as a part of having your email within the Microsoft ecosystem. Defender for Office 365 is that next layer above, and I'll talk about that 2 particular parts of that for you to be aware of. And the Microsoft Purview. Now, Microsoft Purview in the last couple of years has really come to the forefront of a requirement for a lot of businesses, whether it be in enterprise, mid-market, or even the SMB. Microsoft Purview is the engine that safeguards your data. So it is your compliance and governance policy creator for everything that is labeled as data within your organization, whether that be your emails, whether it be through SharePoint, OneDrive, and we'll talk about a little bit more. But the reason it's become very popular is purely on the back of integrating AI into your environment, and is a very essential piece. More than likely we'll do something in more detail around that in other sessions with Cloud Made Simple. Now let's talk about Entra ID. So what we've got here is a challenge, in which case an employee needs to access work data from anywhere. Now, as you can probably, as you might imagine, Jay mentioned as well, that your bad actors aren't necessarily coming straight from Australia. There are bad actors globally, and their MO is to get your user identity and get your business IP and ransom you for money. Now, if one big part of being able to ensure they can't get access into that is enabling things such as your multi-factor authentication. And another big one is what they call conditional access, which we lean on quite heavily. Conditional access will determine and define who's coming in, where you're coming in from, what device you're coming in from, what level of security that device is coming from as well, and also what application is coming in from. So if there is, I'm not too sure, Jay mentioned earlier, it was a great example he brought up around iPhones or your Android device. You keep that up to date because it's very front and center for you when there's an update. But what about those applications behind it? Well, not everyone updates all their applications all the time. So say, for example, there's an application that you're trying to use to access some of your work environment data. And you know that there's a critical vulnerability out there with it at the moment. Well, Microsoft does. If you don't, Microsoft is very aware of these things. It will flag that application cannot access your environment until it is up to date because there is a secure vulnerability in there at the moment. So that's just one part of it. Now, what you find as I go through some of these other features as well is that they all tie in, they work together very seamlessly, all being a part of the Microsoft system. So the Entra ID talks with Intune, which talks to Purview and everything else as well. So it's all tied in quite nicely. Now, one thing to leave you on this slide as well is that very clearly brought out amongst all the research out there is that 99% of identity attacks, so your identity being your usernames and passwords, can be thwarted by enabling multi-factor authentication. You'll find that Business Basic and Business Standard, like I mentioned earlier, they have a very basic security level. We can enable MFA, but it's not the conditional MFA that CMS and the team that can enable it with you if you've got Business Premium. So for example, if you're inside your environment and your environment is well known to CMS as well as the Microsoft, you might be asked for multi-factor authentication unless there's an actual reason why, for example, on a device that's never seen before. But if it's your inside your office environment, it won't ask for MFA. But as soon as you go into a separate device and it's coming from a separate location, so say on a public Wi-Fi at a cafe, Microsoft will prompt you for MFA again, because it's not aware of that device and it's not aware you're coming from. All of these things it learns, as well as policies that can be put in place to ensure that MFA is very, very easy to adapt to, and very, very easy to employ. Let's talk very quickly about another system that we've got here, which is around looking at Intune. Now, Microsoft Intune is the crux of a lot of this. So conditional access makes those decisions in the background as to if you can get access into your work environment, but a lot of it is past information from Intune. Now, Intune is where you can define which apps, even on a BYOD device, can access certain things as it passes it and works with the conditional access from Entra. But the other things it can do as well is, I'm sure you're aware of it, is do things like wipe data remotely. So on this example, very quickly, before I go to that part, on this example, it shows that you've got your BYOD device or your mobile. Now, it is, you'll see this is compartmentalized. You've got your managed apps that you access your company information from, and then you've got your personal apps. So you don't want your personal apps to be able to interact with your company data and vice versa, purely around the potential that there's going to be data leakage. So what you can do with Intune is ensure that any application from a BYOD device is only using the application that is in control of and understands. It will not allow data to go from those applications into an application that's on your phone if it's not within those controlled application list, and it will not allow personal apps to be going the other direction into your company information. So that's just one example. Another example of using Intune is that you also have the ability to wipe devices. Just say, for example, this phone that we're talking about got stolen, and we're not too sure where it is. And there's a concern that, they can access company data, and there's got some company data that might be loaded locally via some of those apps. But you have the ability, as soon as it hits the internet, to actually wipe all that business information from that device. That can be on a mobile, could also be on a laptop as well. Now, I won't go further and more onto Intune, even though there's probably 500 other use cases for it. But let's jump on to the next one because we're running on time. Let's talk about Defender for Office 365, which also comes with Business Premium. Now, as I mentioned, this is the next layer of from spam filtering that you have the ability to use within Business Premium. There are two main features in there. You've got safe links and safe attachments. Now, safe links and attachments don't just work within your emails; they also work within Teams, OneDrive, and SharePoint, which means that if there is a malicious link or an attachment that you are aware of within your OneDrive, SharePoint, whatever of those apps, the Defender for 365 will be aware of it and will prevent you from opening it, running it, saving it, or even going to that specific website as well. Again, it's that multi-layered approach, like I mentioned, because you've got similarities with K365 to this one. Now, one thing to note about the safe links and safe attachment is Microsoft looks at it. If it's coming inbound, Microsoft looks at it into what they call a sandbox environment, completely separate from your tenant, and looks at the attachment, opens the attachment, and looks at the links before it even comes into your mailbox. So if it is defined that attachment, that link does hit a certain bad reputation link or attachment, it will be removed before you even see it. So something that you also have the ability to use. Another one that we'll look at as we move forward is looking at Purview. Now, as I mentioned, Purview is, in the last few years, been extremely popular, and it is something that you have access to with Business Premium. So Purview has the ability to label certain documents that is defined by yourself to ensure the protection of it. This will not only for internal but external purposes as well. So just say, for example, there is a spreadsheet that there's a lot of sensitive information on that only the financial team is allowed to view. It could be put in a SharePoint site that may not have the correct permissions. Permissions go from one user to another accidentally. Whatever it may be, they will get access to that spreadsheet. Now, or that site, sorry, that the spreadsheet lives within. But what you can do is apply what they call sensitive labeling. So with a label, if you apply a label to that document saying only, I think it was might have been Jenny, I think it was, that used Jay before. Sorry, I can't remember the name. But that person has access to that file, and only that person and her colleague Steve has access to that file as well. Just say Jenny, she takes that home on a USB key, and that gets stolen or lost. Now that spreadsheet, if it doesn't have that labeling, will be accessible to anyone that has access to that USB. So it's a very common scenario that we'll hear about. If you apply a sensitive label to that document, once you open that file, the only way they get access to it is if they put in the credentials for Jenny or Steve. That is the only way that is possible. Now that is same for internal. If Michael tried to come in and look at that document as well, because he's got access to the SharePoint site, he won't be able to, because he doesn't have Jenny's or Steve's credentials. Now, this thwarts not only data leakage or accidental data leakage via the USB example, but it also prevents even hackers from even accessing some of that data as well, even if they came in. Just say, for example, my account got hacked. It wouldn't matter too much for this particular document because I don't have access to it. There are certain principles, what they call just enough access, that the Cloud Map Simple team can take you through, which defines a lot of that. Purview also is the key principle data compliance and governance controller within Microsoft 365. Within Microsoft, with Copilot, Microsoft Copilot has the ability to view and surface all files that that user has access to. If that user has access to but does not have permissions to view that file, Microsoft Copilot will adhere to those permissions and not give that person permission or the ability to gain information via the AI. So this is part of the reason why it is being very, very highly looked at from a lot of Microsoft companies that have a lot of their data within SharePoint, for example. So yeah, we'll go through that in more detail at another time. But
Certainly will.
Yep. Now I've gone well over, and I hope I've covered everything in there, Gav.
You certainly have covered in great detail, and it's really important for our customers to understand how complex and what value there is in the business premium license. But again, thank you to Jay, and thank you very much to Datto, and thank you to you, Mark and Ingram, for supporting us, and thank you for joining the webinar tonight.